Thank you for coming to our webinar on registration, the CETP exams, and mentorship. In order for things to run smoothly, we recommend that you close all applications to help maintain a stable audio and video connection. If your connection freezes during the webinar, we suggest that you exit GoToWebinar and just return to the session. The video and slides for this presentation will be posted on CASLPO's website within 1 week of the presentation date. So in order to access those slides, you would just visit the applicants page on our CASLPO's website, go to Apply to the College in the menu on the left, and then click on Internationally Educated Applicants, which is also in the menu on the left. So your presenters today, I am Colleen Myrie, the Director of Registration Services, and we also have with us Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Cupid. I am the International Applications Coordinator. And if you have questions, a lot of them will come to me.
And hi, everyone. I'm Sunita Jalgakar. I'm the Audiology Advisor and Manager of the Mentorship Program.
So our presentation today, we will look at 4 areas with respect to the registration process. We'll start with CASLPO's Registration Regulation Amendment and the Canadian Entry to Practice exams for the professions of audiology and speech-language pathology. We'll talk about good character, becoming a CASLPO registrant, which includes both the application and the registration process, and also mentorship. We will, you can enter questions in the Q&A section of GoToWebinar at any time during the presentation, and we will answer your questions at the end of the registration with CASLPO section of the presentation, and again after the section about mentorship. If you don't have time, if we don't have time to answer all the questions we received during this presentation, we will answer those questions in an FAQ, and once we have posted them on our website, we'll notify all the webinar participants that those FAQs are available. The agenda for today's presentation will include a 5-minute bio break before we start the mentorship section of the presentation. So the first topic that we will talk about is about the Registration Regulation Amendment and the Canadian Entry to Practice exams for the professions of audiology and speech-language pathology. So just to talk a little bit about our regulations, the college must assess applications in accordance with the requirements outlined in Ontario Regulation 2112. That is our registration regulation. These requirements are laws, and when a requirement is listed as non-exemptable, it means that this requirement must be applied as written. So it also means that the CASLPO's registrar, college staff, and the college's registration committee do not have the authority to waive a non-exemptable requirement. So on March 12th, 2021, the amendments to CASLPO CASLPO registration regulation were approved by the Ontario government. We've provided the link to the regulation. One of the amendments to the regulation relates to the introduction of the Canadian entry to practice exams for the professions of audiology and speech language pathology as a non-exemptable registration requirement. The CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology are competency-based examinations that aim to test the recall of relevant information, but more importantly, the clinical application of that knowledge and critical thinking. These exams are based on the national competency profiles and were created by professional subject matter experts working with SAC to ensure a reliable and valid exam process based on national psychometric standards. The curriculum for each Canadian education program is mapped against the national competency profiles. So the curriculum includes theory within classroom settings and the skills and application of theory during the clinical practicum. In our registration regulation, we have a section 5.5 that talks about the transition from the old registration requirements to the new. And so in this section, it specifies that if a person submitted an application for a certificate of registration on or before the day Ontario Regulation 188/2021 came into force, but before April 1st, 2021, the requirement under paragraph 3 of subsection 1 does not apply to that person. So just to break this down a little bit, all of the regulation amendments are contained in the regulation 188/21. And those amendments were consolidated into Ontario Regulation 2112. And paragraph 3 relates to the registration exam for CASLPO. So it says that applicants must write a registration exam. So if you applied before April 1st, 2021, the requirement does not apply to you. However, those that apply on or after April 1st, 2021 must pass the Canadian entry to practice exam as a registration requirement for CASLPO. So CASLPO also included a provision in our registration regulation that allows the registrar to issue an initial certificate of registration to an applicant prior to them sitting the Canadian entry to practice exams for audiology and SLP, provided the applicant commits to write their profession's exam during the 6-month mentorship period. So in order for an initial certificate to be issued, the applicant must sign an agreement to write their profession's CETP exam during the 6-month term of their initial certificate of registration. This agreement is known as an undertaking. When completing registration as an initial registrant, an undertaking must be signed by the applicant agreeing to take their profession's CETP exam during the 6-month term of their initial practice certificate of registration, and also to stop practicing within 30 days if they fail the CETP exam while holding an initial certificate. So if an individual does fail the exam, they may reapply for registration with CASLPO once they have passed their profession's CETP exam, and depending on their situation, when they return to practice, they may continue with their mentorship. They may or may not be required to continue with their mentorship, depending on what stage they were in at the point that they failed the exam. So Speech, Language and Audiology Canada, SAC, is responsible for the administration of the CETP exams for audiology and speech language pathology. We've provided a link to SAC's website where you can get more information about the CETP exam. So this is what SAC's website looks like, and when you get there, this is their CETP exam section of SAC's website that provides all the information that you would need about the exam. So when we say that SAC administers the CETP exam for audiology and SLP, their website provides the following information. Writing, they have information about writing the exam, which includes exam format, fees, and exam sites. Preparing for the exam, which includes tools and practical tips. And also information about after the exam, which includes information about obtaining exam results, scoring, and the appeal process. So the CETP exams for audiology and SLP are transitioning from a paper format to an online format for the next exam. So that will be the December exam. And the SAC's website will be updated in regular intervals to reflect changes in the enrollment process. So when we talk about CASLPO's role in the licensing process, we say that, of course, CASLPO issues a license to allow individuals to practice audiology or speech language pathology in the province of Ontario. And on CASLPO's website, the registration information includes information about applying for registration with CASLPO, timelines for processing applications, fees associated with registration, details about referrals to the registration committee, and the process for appealing registration committee decisions. We also provide information about the mentorship program, which includes the mentorship self-assessment tool, which is known as the MSAT, which we will provide more information about later in the presentation. So, if you are applying for registration in Ontario, we say that you should only obtain information about registration in Ontario from either the CASLPO website, and if you want information about the CETP exams for audiology and SLP, you should obtain it from SAC's website. Just to say that if you go to the CASPR website, which is CAASPR website, it does not apply, the information there does not apply to CASLPO applicants, so please just refer to CASLPO's website or the CETP exam website on or information on SAC's website. If you are applying for registration in another province, we urge you to consult the province's regulatory body for more information about registration. So as we go through the presentation, we do have a few questions that we received that we wanted to address during the presentation. And our first one is about applying for registration in Alberta and then coming to Ontario. So it says, if I understand the information on the website correctly, when I am registered with CASLPO, Alberta College of Speech, Language Pathology and Audiology, I do not need the CETP exam in order to practice in Ontario, correct? And the answer is yes. If you apply for registration in Ontario as a labor mobility applicant from Alberta, you do not need to write the CETP exam to practice in Ontario. However, to qualify for registration in Ontario, you must meet some requirements for that labor mobility to occur. So you have to hold a current certificate of registration that is equivalent to a certificate that is issued by CASLPO in that other jurisdiction. You must submit a completed labor mobility application form. You must provide information regarding your past conduct. You must also provide a letter from every regulatory body where you currently or have previously held a certificate of registration. You must also provide evidence of your professional experience in audiology and speech-language pathology in the 3-year period before applying for registration in Ontario. So that means that any patient care or related work hours that you've completed must be verified by your current or previous employer in Alberta. So having practiced the profession is a requirement for labor mobility to occur. You must also have, of course, professional liability insurance coverage and pay all applicable fees. We want to note here that it should be understood that making any false or misleading statements or representation in respect to your application is considered an act of professional misconduct and may lead to disciplinary and other proceedings. So we say this because I think it's important to note we have a current applicant who did just this. They provided information that was not truthful in their application while doing a labor mobility application. And now not only did they get rejected for registration in the province that they wanted to go to, that has led to other issues and investigations about their registration with CASLPO. So it's just not worth it. So our second question is, I understand I will need to complete an application for labor mobility, transferring between colleges and provinces, and was wondering how long that process takes from submitting the application to receiving registration. So the timelines, if you meet all of the requirements for labor mobility, it takes approximately 15 business days to review the application and 5 business days to issue the registration after submission of a completed registration form. If your application does not meet the requirements for registration, the application must be referred to our registration committee, and that process could take up to 6 months to complete. Upon review of a application for labor mobility, the registration committee may require the applicant who does not meet the labor mobility requirements to undertake, obtain, or undergo material additional training, experience, examinations, or assessments. So moving from labor mobility, it's a good segue into the topic of good character. So good character, what is it exactly? So you'll see our word cloud, which includes some of the concepts of good character, such as honesty, respect, integrity, ethical. So, but good character is defined in our registration regulation in section 3. And in section 3.6, it says that an applicant's past and present conduct must afford reasonable grounds for the belief that the applicant does not have a physical or mental condition or disorder that could affect his or her ability to practice the profession in a safe manner, will practice the profession with decency, integrity, and honesty, and in accordance with the law, and will display an appropriate professional attitude. So that is how the bar that you're asked to meet upon entering the profession with respect to good character. And so I would like to illustrate a scenario that comes from the news. A group of male dentistry students at Dalhousie University posted sexually violent comments about female classmates on their Facebook page. And the content of the Facebook group became public, and the university suspended the 13 students who were members of the group. What should a regulatory body, the regulatory body's registration committee, do if they receive an application from one of these students? So we have some options. One is to issue a certificate of registration. Another would be to issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training specified by the panel. They could require some sexual harassment awareness and prevention training. Refuse to issue a certificate of registration, or none of the above. So, as you think about those options for the registration committee, we would just like to say that the misconduct does not necessarily bar an applicant from registration, but it does trigger an inquiry into the applicant's suitability to practice. So each application must be assessed by the registration committee on a case-by-case basis once it's referred to the registration committee. And the committee would want to know what the applicant's conduct was and the details of the conduct before a decision could be made about their registration with the college. Just to say on that previous slide, the decision is not always the same for those situations, depending on what the applicant has done. The registration committee will look at a whole lot of factors to determine whether or not that person should be issued registration with the college. So we will now start with the topic of registration with the college. So the first thing is it's important to know that it is registration with CASLPO and not the university degree in audiology or speech language pathology that gives the legal authority to use the titles of audiologist, speech language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of these titles in Ontario, or to make any representation to the public that an individual is qualified to practice audiology or speech language pathology in Ontario. So for healthcare professionals in Ontario, self-regulation is a privilege, not a right. So when you are registered with CASLPO, you are joining the company of other regulated professionals in the province, such as nurses, teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers. I guess as well, the privilege of registration or regulation has come to the professions of audiology and speech language pathology, and part of that evolution is also the introduction of this registration exam. So we are one of the few regulated professions that did not have a registration exam. And now that we do have one, we are meeting the same standards as other regulators, especially in the healthcare field. So we have a few scenarios that we will provide you with throughout the presentation. And the person in these scenarios, her name is Mia. And Mia in this scenario has a master's degree from a program in speech language pathology from University X and plans to work in Ontario, but she's not registered with CASLPO yet. So Mia decides to create the following LinkedIn profile. So here's Mia's profile. It says that Mia is a speech language pathologist, pre-registered, and she's in the Ottawa, Canada area. And in the summary, she includes this information. I am a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Ontario, and I have excellent communication skills and pride myself on my ability to develop a rapport with clients and their families. So, is the information on Mia's LinkedIn profile acceptable according to the college regulations? Yes or no? So we would say no. We have highlighted in red on this slide where the problems are with Mia's LinkedIn profile. So the first thing is she's using the what we call a variation of the title of speech language pathologist by calling herself a speech language pathologist pre-registered. This is not a title that the college issues, and nor can it be used by somebody who is not registered with the college. She also, in the summary, says that I am a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Ontario. This section as well, it represents herself as qualified to practice in Ontario. If somebody, a member of the public, was looking at this, I think they would probably make the assumption that she is good to go. So that scenario is actually one that we took from an application that we were processing at the time, and came to these realization that this person was infringing on the title before holding a certificate of registration with the college. So now we are going into the section about the registration process, and I will hand things over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. Can everybody hear me? I think. Okay. So as I said before, I am the International Applications Coordinator at CASLPO, and not that you are internationally trained, but your applications will come through me. So I will take you through the process. Just as a blanket picture, this is a big slide with lots of pictures on it. I'll take you through it carefully, and then we'll talk about the steps as we go through the presentation. So the application process, you're applying to register with CASLPO if you're coming to Ontario, and you're going to apply for the CETP exam, again, if you're coming to Ontario. So they are somewhat discrete processes. On the left-hand side, for registration with CASLPO, first step is to read our application guide, which I'll show you where to find it. Then you're going to submit your documents to us. And the second step, after we've received your application form, you're going to hear from us within 3 weeks by email, and we'll let you know if you've submitted all the documents or if there are any outstanding documents that you still need to send to us. And then once we've received all of your documents, we're going to put your application in the queue for review. And at that point, you'll receive a ready to review email, which means that you're in the queue, and you'll hear from us once we finish the application review. The third step is the actual review to determine if you're eligible for registration, and that is by us. And we will have that done within 6 weeks of the time when you receive the ready for review email. And then if you're determined eligible at that point, then you can get registered with CASLPO with proof of either you've enrolled in the exam or you've completed the exam successfully. As well, you need an offer of employment for an initial certificate, and you need the name of a mentor. So those are basically the steps for registration with CASLPO. And then on the right-hand side, we have enrollment for the CETP exam. And I'm sure you've noticed that, our processes have been changing over the last few months, and that is because we are just getting this running. So bear with us. I think we're almost there, and we will give you information if anything changes as soon as we know it. However, with SAC, we've determined a fairly simple process for you guys from McMaster to enroll in the CETP exam. Once it's the exam enrollment period, which is August 15th to September 30th for the December 2nd exam, during that period, you can go to the SAC website and enroll for the CETP exam. It's that simple. And then the next step for confirming your eligibility for the exam is once we go to step 3 from the registration with CASLPO application process, once CASLPO has determined that you have met the requirements for registration, then CASLPO will confirm with SAC that you are in fact eligible for the CETP exam. So if you're eligible for registration with CASLPO, then you're eligible for enrollment with the CETP exam. So we will confirm it with SAC, and then you can write the exam. So there's the 2 separate processes, and they join together at one point. We will go through this again, later through. Okay, so the initial certificate with CASLPO, new graduates will apply for the initial certificate, and this certificate is for people who have fulfilled the academic and good character registration requirements, and if you completed fewer than 750 hours of professional experience in the last years in another jurisdiction. So that one probably won't apply to you. but that we also do offer the initial certificate to those individuals. So how to start? It's not that complicated. I hope we've simplified it. So as a new graduate of a Canadian program with candidate status, McMaster, you must submit the following things: a completed application form for international and non-accredited Canadian programs. And so here's our website, and this is where you can find this. If you click on applicants on the bottom right-hand corner, and then this will appear on the left, apply to college, you click on that. And then you see apply to college here, and you go to the internationally educated applicants. Our title was too long, so we couldn't put the non-accredited Canadian programs on the left-hand navigation bar as well. But you click on there, and then path 2 will open up, and this is all information that you should read. And then towards, if you scroll down, you see steps to becoming registered with CASLPO. Step 1, download the application guide and forms. So you click on there, and that will open in a new window the application guide with the forms. So you will fill out the application form. You will send us an official transcript from your graduate and undergraduate programs. So we require the official transcript to be sent to us directly from the university. We do accept official e-transcripts if your university provides them. And this number 3 is only if you completed your bachelor's degree outside of Canada. In that case, we require an academic credential assessment, and we have information in the guide about how to get that. If your bachelor's degree was obtained in Canada, then ignore number 3. We require a letter from your program director verifying the completion of your master's degree program, and it'll also verify the date on which your degree will be conferred. So Lynn will send this to us on your behalf, but you should ask her for it. Let her know that you are applying to Ontario and ask for this to be sent to us. You need a completed coursework requirements form, and as you'll see, you will need to submit the related areas section to us. And this is because your professors have done most of the work for you. So we've worked with them, and they have provided to us all the hours of the entire 2-year program broken down into the different sections of our coursework form. And so in filling out the form, you only need to provide coursework from your previous degrees as they fit into this chart. And I'll show you what that looks like. So there are 5 sections on the coursework form, but we only need you to send us the related areas section. So the first page is the area basic communication processes. This has been completed for you, so you don't need to send this. The second section is the related areas, and courses in this section are like Introduction to Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, Sociology, Child Development. Most psych courses will fit in here. Or statistics, research methods, those courses can fit here. This final section, which is professional issues, probably you don't have that in your undergraduate. And overall, applicants to CASLPO need 180 coursework hours in this section. Your professors have shown us that you've completed already about 130 of these hours. So you need to show us on this form that you've completed at least 49 hours in this section. So psych courses and stats courses, essentially, you can put on this form. The major professional area courses, this has been filled out for you, for you. Minor professional area, which for you is audiology coursework, this has been filled out for you. And then we ask for it to be broken, your major area coursework to be broken down across the areas, but that has been filled out for you, so you don't need to do this one either. So what you need to put on that form is the course name and the number of coursework hours for a given course. Hours are calculated by the number of hours per week, generally times the number of weeks in a semester. In Canadian programs, it's usually 12 or 13 week semesters. No, 12 or 13 weeks in a semester, sorry. And a 3-credit course or a 0.5 course are usually 3 hours a week. So that's 3 times 12 or 3 times 13. So generally, a Canadian undergraduate course is 36 or 39 hours. This information will be contained in the syllabus or transcript that you provide to us. And if you really can't find this information in documentation, you can provide it to us in a different way, like a letter from the professor. So as I implied in that last bit, you need to provide a syllabus for each of the undergraduate courses that you use on your coursework form to meet our requirements. Now you really, because you only need to show us 50 hours in psych or statistics courses. So really, if you show us 2 3-credit courses, that's already 72 hours. So you don't need to show us all the psych courses you did, really. You can show us 2 as long as you've passed the 50-hour threshold. That'll be fine. Okay, you also need to submit to us a signed and verified CASLPO summary of clinical practicum hours form. And again, your program director or designate of your program must sign and verify the form. And Justine, I believe, will help you with this. But again, you need to ask her to send it to us if you are applying to CASLPO. And photocopies are not acceptable, and it must be sent from Justine or whoever is providing it. You need to send the application fee to us. And at the end of the application form in the guide, we have this checklist for you just to make sure that you've sent everything. And also this presentation will be on the website, so you can also review this there if you like. So you need to submit a completed signed and dated application form, application fee, transcripts. This is all the same information that I just gave you, but it's here for you to refer to. And again, if your undergraduate degree was not completed in Canada, you need to submit an academic credential assessment for us. But if both degrees were in Canada, you don't need to submit that. And because you were educated in English, you don't need to provide us with evidence of English or French proficiency. And from those documents, these documents must be originals. The university transcripts and transcripts must be sent in a university sealed envelope or as an official e-transcript, which is password protected by the university, if that's available. You need your letter from the program director must be original, as the clinical practicum hours must be signed original. Okay, so how long does this process take? Well, let's see. So once your application form is received by us, we do the intake process, and it takes us about 3 weeks for us to review all the documents you've sent. And then we will send you an email at that time, letting you know which documents we've received and which ones are outstanding, if that's applicable. And then once we've received all of your documents, as I said earlier, we're going to send you a ready to review email that will let you know that your application is now in the queue, ready for the review. And the registration eligibility review this year will take up to 6 weeks for us to complete. We've chopped off a month from that review time, so we'll hopefully get things ready for you sooner. And that 6-week period is from the date that you receive the ready for review email. If there's an issue or if there's somehow missing documentation, the process can take longer. And then at that point, if you're eligible, then you may register with CASLPO. And as I said in the first slide, CASLPO will confirm your CETP eligibility at this time with SAC. Now, to guarantee that we can review your application in time in order for that confirmation to happen for the December 2nd exam, we need to have received all of your documents by September 10th, because that gives us the intake time, the review time, and then we can get the confirmation to SAC in time for them to finalize their enrollment numbers. Okay, so in our review process, that's essentially how it will work. And we are committed to processing applications as quickly as possible, and we do it in the order that each application is received in the completed form. We ask that you please resist the temptation to call us to check on the status of your application, because it really slows our processing down if we have to interrupt what we're doing and check things that are unrelated. So we really do have a good process going, and if we do get things done as quickly as possible, and we will let you know. We will contact you as soon as we have the information. If there's been a change to your application, if you've moved and you have a new address, then certainly contact us and give us that information. Or if you have additional documentation to send, absolutely send that to us. Okay, so we have another scenario with Mia. She is concerned, and these scenarios are all based on real life. Mia is concerned that her courier company didn't send the application package properly. Should Mia contact us to confirm the receipt of her application? Yes or no? We answer no. As I said, once we receive your application form, you'll receive an email, and once we have all your documents, we will send you another email. So we will keep in contact with you at each step. If we've gone over the 6-week period or the 3-week period, then yes, you may contact us. But also know that mail is slow, so if you mail something by Canada Post, it may not be there the next day because the pandemic has slowed processes down. But we will be in contact with you as soon as we have reached the next step. So what I just said, during the pandemic, hopefully this will be ending and easing soon. We are operating a virtual office. Currently, we have no walk-in visits being accepted because we're not in the office. We are still providing all of our registration services, but application processing timelines may require adjustments, like receiving mail is a little slower during this period since we are not at the office. Okay, Mia calls Jessica Laforette at CASLPO, and she is in our registration department and will be very helpful to all of you. I have been offered my dream job, and the employer says I need to start in 2 weeks. I'm just about to submit my application to CASLPO. If I'm not registered in 2 weeks, I will lose this job opportunity. So should CASLPO, should we push this file to the top of the queue so that she can start her employment in time? Yes or no? We say no. What she's asking there is for her application to be placed ahead of others, which we will not do. We must provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all of our applicants, as required by the Office of the Fairness Commissioner of Ontario. And if we were to advance her file because she got this dream job in 2 weeks, it's really unfair to others, and maybe you're in that queue who submitted their applications earlier and who may also be waiting to start their dream job. So at the same time, Mia's potential employer calls Jessica Laforette at CASLPO and says, I would like to hire this graduating student for a position we have. We need her to start in 2 weeks, otherwise the children at the center will not get the service they're entitled to. So what should we do there? Do we push her file to the top of the queue? No. For the same reasons, we have to provide the impartial, transparent, and fair process. And if we advance her file because these children would not receive service, it's again unfair to other applicants who submitted their applications earlier and who may also have patients who are waiting for service in the same way. So again, with our process, once we've confirmed in an email that the application is complete, then they're placed in the queue and we do not deviate from that order. So plan ahead, get your stuff in as soon as possible. There's nothing stopping that other than finishing your program, but you can start sending your syllabi or start gathering that information, start gathering your old transcripts from your universities. And also importantly, speak with potential employers about the application process and the registration process. Be honest with them about the timelines, because we've seen situations where the employer was not made aware, and it can get uncomfortable for the potential employee who now has to say, I'm not registered, I can't start on Monday, because it is not possible for us to expedite any applications. Okay, so application review process. Once we have the completed application and it's reached the top of the queue, we review it to determine if the registration requirements have been met. If your application is approved, you'll be notified by email that you are now eligible for registration with the college. So then you're finished the application phase and you're moving on to the registration process. Excuse me. So as I said, the registration process begins after the application process is successful. And when you're deemed eligible, you will receive from us an initial certificate registration form in your email. And so in order to complete the registration process to become an initial registrant of CASLPO, you must have an offer of employment in Ontario to work as a speech pathologist. And completing the registration, you must submit the following items and information. We need the completed initial certificate registration form, and your form and all the documents must be received by CASLPO at least 5 business days ahead of your start date. And that's because that's how much time it will take us to review it. So we need to have that at least a week before you intend to start working. And on the certificate registration form, you must include your mentor's name and proof that you've enrolled in the CETP exam for your profession, or proof that you've already completed the exam successfully in the past 2 or 3 years. And there's an asterisk here. If the enrollment period for the next CETP exam has not begun at the time that you receive your registration form and are ready to become registered, contact us and we'll provide you with directions about what to do. You must provide your, and I'll just go back to that last slide. And remember that you can enroll with SAC independently of CASLPO. So you can do that at the same time as you're submitting documents. You need to submit your employment start date, and this date refers to the date you expect to begin working as a speech pathologist in Ontario. If you don't know what it is, you can say pending completion of registration with CASLPO. And then your employment information, and this is information related to your practice location. And we also need your direct reports or your manager's contact information, and we need their name and email address. We need information about your professional liability insurance coverage information. We need the carrier name, the policy certificate number, expiry date. This is all on the registration form, pardon me. And the coverage required is $2 million per claim. Excuse me. We also need a document providing proof of your eligibility to work in Canada legally, and that can be Canadian citizenship, like a photocopy of your Canadian birth certificate or valid Canadian passport, or both sides of your Canadian citizenship card. It could be permanent resident status, or Canadian employment authorization, like a work permit. You also need to submit the registration fee, as well as a prorated annual fee payment. So the annual fee is prorated quarterly for the registration year, and the registration year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So depending on when you apply in the year, if you apply in the first quarter, you'll pay the full amount of the annual fee, but if you apply in the fourth quarter, you'll pay a quarter, a prorated amount. I don't know the exact details. And here's a link to our fees chart. You can also find it looking on the website in the applicant section. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, once we've received all of the required documents for registration, it can take up to 5 business days to issue the certificate, and you can't begin working until you have your registration number. And then congratulations, you are registered with CASLPO and ready to start your employment as a speech pathologist. And just for future knowledge, as I mentioned, there's renewal every year, and all certificates of registration must be renewed on or before October 1st of each year. So once you're registered, you'll be given reminders of that. So here is a frequently asked question that we have. Mia has asked if she can start working as an audiologist or speech pathologist once she submits an application to CASLPO. And of course, you know that's not right. You cannot work as a speech pathologist or audiologist until after you've been issued a certificate of registration by CASLPO and you've received your registration number. So where to find our application FAQs? Let's see, if we go to the applicant section and then over to apply to the college here, and then internationally educated applicants, which is path 2, which is you guys. And just below this title, you see the, oh, I bet if I do this, I will find the FAQs by applicants from international and non-accredited Canadian programs. So this is just a bunch of questions that may be really helpful to you for the application process. Where to find the latest CETP information. Colleen went through what kind of information you'll find on CASLPO's website compared to what you find on SAC's website. So certainly go to the SAC website and you'll get all sorts of important information about the exam. And on our website, we have, in the applicant section, we have on the left navigation toolbar, we have a section on the CETP exam. And you will find information primarily about enrollment as relates to CASLPO registrants or CASLPO applicants on our website. So that is where you can find that. Okay. Are there any questions? I think Colleen will come back and we can go through questions that you may have.
All right, Colleen's here, Jennifer's here. I do have some questions. The first one I'm going to ask is, someone has asked, doesn't legislation allow 2 years to pass the CETP after initial license issued, not 6 months?
Okay, so I'll take that question. Basically, what the legislation allows is that the applicant completes the exam during the term of their initial certificate, and the term of an initial certificate is 6 months. The registrar does have the discretion to extend the term of the certificate, but it's not something that is required. Recently, the college's council met to discuss this policy recommendation for one attempt at the exam during the term of the initial certificate of registration, and it was approved by the council. And basically, it's a rule that we've put in place for public protection. So everyone will have that opportunity to take the exam, but if you do fail it, your next attempts will be as not a member of the college.
All right, I have another question. How long can one go between obtaining initial registration, completing the CETP exam, and finding a mentor/job for completing registration and becoming fully licensed? Another way to ask that question, I guess, would be, what is the maximum allowed time frame to start the registration process after the application has been approved?
Okay, so if your application has been approved and your application is actually effective for up to 2 years from the date that it's been submitted. So if you decide during that, your application is approved, but you don't really want to write the exam right away, you can do so, but I guess once, or you can delay your registration. However, once you do become registered, the clock starts ticking. So once you become registered, you have that 6-month period to do that exam and complete your initial practice period, your mentorship as well during that period. So I hope that answers the question. You do have a little time between your application being approved and actually completing the registration process, but once you become an initial registrant, you must, if you haven't written the exam during that before becoming registered, then the clock starts ticking at that point.
Pauline, do you think we have one more, one more question?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So my next question is, I lost it, hold on. Oh, how far in advance will CASLPO be receiving documents? I'm specifically thinking about ordering my transcript for my undergraduate degree in advance to give it ample time to arrive to CASLPO office. Will there be a way to verify it arrived, as it will be in a sealed envelope?
Well, definitely people can send documents in advance. We continue to receive mail during the pandemic, and however, if say you submit a transcript to us and we haven't received an application yet, basically what we do is we just file that document until an application does arrive, and then we match the two together. And then at that point, with the arrival of the application, it will take about that 15 business days, 3 weeks to actually for us to confirm the receipt of the application and if there are any other outstanding documents that need to be submitted to complete the application.
And to
So
add
you're welcome
to
to
that,
start.
oh, just to add to that question, the answer, Colleen, I just wanted to say that currently, because of the pandemic and a lot of, and like CASLPO working virtually, we are not receiving hand-delivered couriers or any couriers. So if you're sending something like a transcript, please ask the school to send it by regular mail or by registered mail or by express post only.
Thank you, Jessica.
And you may submit them now if you like,
yeah,
if you want to get a start on it.
Yeah, especially your undergraduate documents. It's, doesn't hurt to get that underway and to us as quickly as you can. It's one less thing to worry about. Alrighty then. So we will take that 5-minute break and we'll see you back, and we will be discussing mentorship. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Okay, so I think it's been about 5 minutes now. So I will get started on this second part of the presentation. Jessica, can I just get confirmation that we're good to go?
Oh yeah, I'm good to go. You're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm Samita Joglekar. I'm the Manager of Mentorship and the Audiology Advisor, and I'm going to be taking you through this next part of the presentation on CASLPO's mentorship program. So hopefully most of you are back from the bio break, and we will continue on with our presentation. So why does CASLPO have a mentorship program? Well, mentorship is a condition of your initial certificate of registration. So for all of you who plan to stay and practice in Ontario and become registered to practice in Ontario, mentorship will be a requirement. It's required. It's a required registration process in the registration regulation. Another reason why we have a mentorship program is because it introduces you as an initial registrant and a mentee to CASLPO's quality assurance program through an online self-assessment tool and a process of practice evaluation. And this is a process that you will be engaging with every year through the quality assurance program as a registrant of CASLPO. And then we have a picture here, which is part of the college's mission and mandate, which is to serve and protect the public interest. And that is another reason why we have a mentorship program, because it is a way for CASLPO to also confirm your competency through the process that you'll go through by completing the mentorship. So let's go through the basics of mentorship. So the mentorship period is always a minimum of 6 months for everyone. During this time, you must provide at least 500 hours of patient care. You can do more, but you can't do less. Your mentor must provide at least 48 hours of guidance. Again, they can provide more, but they can't provide less. And this guidance could be direct or indirect. We ask that it be spread over time. So we recommend 2 hours per week or maybe 1 day a month, but we don't want the guidance to be all bunched up at the beginning or end of the mentorship. And some direct observation of your practice is mandatory. So a question that we've received is, how many direct observation hours are required? And the answer to this is that the college doesn't specify the number of hours for direct observation because it will depend on a few things, such as the practice environment that you're working in, your skills and confidence, and the level of risk related to the clinical area. For example, if you're working in dysphagia and doing swallowing assessments, there may be a certain level of risk associated with that practice area compared to others in speech-language pathology. So you will be deciding with your mentor how much direct observation is needed based on the factors just mentioned. And your mentor as well will decide how much direct observation is needed to confirm that you meet standards, because that is one of the big roles that your mentor plays in their role as a mentor, is to confirm that you are meeting the practice standards of the college. So you can refer to the mentorship program guidelines for more information on guidance and observation, and I will be showing you where to find the guidelines document a little later. So let's continue with the mentorship basics. So you and your mentor will complete the mentorship self-assessment tool called the MSAT over the course of your mentorship period. And what this MSAT tool includes is a self-assessment, so you'll be assessing yourself on the practice standards and uploading evidence to show how you meet those standards. And we also have something called the clinical reasoning tool, which has been incorporated into the mentorship. And we ask you to complete this with your mentor at the midterm. And using the MSAT, your mentor will also assess you on the standards and will submit a midterm and final report to the college via the tool. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship extensions. We've received some questions about how or whether or not you can extend your mentorship. So whether or not you can extend your mentorship will depend on if you start your mentorship after you've passed the CETP exam versus if you start your mentorship before you've written the CETP exam. So let's talk about if you start your mentorship after you've passed the CETP exam. So in that case, your mentorship period may be extended if a formal request is approved by the college. So we review the requests for extension that come in, and then extensions are typically granted in 3-month intervals. But it's important to remember that your mentorship period cannot exceed 24 months from the date of your initial CASLPO registration. So there is that 24-month time limit. So what about if you start your mentorship before you've passed the exam? So in this case, Colleen mentioned in her part of the presentation that even if you haven't written the exam, you could still apply and become registered. But in that case, your mentorship will be extended automatically to allow you to enroll in the next CETP exam and to receive your exam results. And if you pass the CETP exam, and then if you need more time to complete your mentorship, a formal request can be submitted and approved, as I explained a moment ago. But if you don't pass the CETP exam, then you cannot continue with your mentorship. So in that case, you must transfer your patients to a colleague or prepare them for discharge within 30 days. And you also must inform your mentor that you are required to stop practicing and that your mentorship will be on hold until you have passed the CETP exam and your registration has been reinstated with the college. So in that case, a question is, how will you resume your mentorship? So what will happen in this case is the college will determine how your mentorship can be resumed after your initial certificate has been reinstated. So your mentorship would have been on hold, and then you'll write and pass the exam, and then we'll determine how you can resume it. So it really will depend on how your mentorship was progressing before it was put on hold. If it's confirmed that your mentorship period was progressing well before it was put on hold, then you may be able to resume where you left off with the same or a new mentor. If for some reason your mentorship period was not progressing well before it was put on hold, then college staff will contact you about beginning your mentorship and beginning your MSAT again. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship versus supervision, because these things are different. So during mentorship, you as an initial registrant are accountable for your clinical work and decisions. So we would like to put this question out to you. What does being accountable mean? And maybe I'll just pause for a minute. And if you have a piece of paper in front of you, or if you're on your computer, maybe you could just write a word or type out a word that you think you associate with being accountable. What does it mean if you are accountable? So how we answer this, and we have another nice word cloud here with different words that we would associate with accountability, like being responsible, honest, having integrity. And basically, to be accountable means that you are a professional who is expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. That is part of what accountability means. So what does it mean to be a professional? What is professionalism? Well, it's really an attitude and a personal philosophy that you bring to your working life. For example, the desire to always improve and learn, knowing the limitations of your knowledge and your scope of practice, being a leader when you have the opportunity to lead rather than following, doing your best even when it's challenging, always putting your patients first, and maintaining professional boundaries. Professionalism is also a set of behaviors. if you think about professionals that you've met and what in their behavior makes you think that they are very professional. Well, it's that they're responsible and they're reliable and fair and honest. So for example, if you're late arriving to work or late for a meeting, that you take responsibility for that, and maybe you apologize to your colleagues and you take steps to not be late the next time. So let's look at a scenario with Mia, who we've been talking about so far today. This scenario is to build on those ideas of professionalism and accountability. So Mia is an initial registrant SLP who works as an independent contractor. And she's told by a senior colleague that consent for assessment doesn't need to be documented in the patient record. Now, this is incorrect. Both consent for assessment and treatment must be documented according to CASLPO standards and according to legislation that applies in the province of Ontario. So, regrettably, unfortunately, a complaint is filed to the college that involves Mia. And during the investigation, patient records are reviewed, and it's confirmed that consent for assessment was not documented. So Mia is asked to explain why she didn't document the consent. And her explanation is the following. So she says, I was told by a senior colleague that this was okay, so I trusted them and I didn't question it. And I didn't want to create tension between me and my employer by asking too many questions, and I was new, and I didn't realize this was wrong. So our question to you is, do you think Mia's justification for her actions and decisions is reasonable? And how we would answer this is no. Being naive isn't a defense. So circling back to what we were talking about in terms of accountability, this is something that changes when you become a registrant, when you become a regulated health professional. When you become registered to practice with CASLPO, it means now you are a speech language pathologist and you are accountable for the decisions that you make. When you're a student, you're supervised, and your supervisor is accountable for the decisions and the clinical care that is provided. But when you become registered to practice and you can use the title speech language pathologist, it means that you're a professional and you're accountable for your actions and decisions. So it's an important difference to take note of. Of course, when we all begin our practice and our careers, we of course have questions, and that's another reason why the mentorship is important, because it is meant also to be a supportive process for you. To have a colleague who is more experienced, who you can discuss clinical cases with, who you can discuss your clinical reasoning with, and your practice with, so that you can understand the standards and ensure that you're meeting them. So let's talk a little bit about your mentor's role, because your mentor is not a supervisor. So mentors are providing guidance and support to help you understand and apply practice standards, improve your competence, and apply principles of sound clinical judgment. Mentors are there to observe and discuss your practice with you in relation to the practice standards. And importantly, the college does ask mentors to assess if you meet the standards during your mentorship and to submit reports of your progress to the college. So what are the practice standards? Well, these are the minimum performance expectations of all SLPs and audiologists practicing in Ontario in all practice settings. So these are principles that apply in every practice setting that an SLP would practice within. And these principles are outlined, these standards are outlined in the mentorship self-assessment tool. So when you go into the tool, you'll see all of the standards are listed there. In addition to those broad principles that are in the MSAT, there are also area-specific standards. So for example, there's a standard for assessment of adults and children by SLPs. There are standards for dysphagia, And for audiologists, there are also standards for the provision of hearing aid services. So when we say practice standards, we're referring to these principles that apply to everyone, and also area-specific practice standards. So in the mentorship self-assessment tool, the standards are outlined as categories with practice indicators that fall under each category. So I've put the categories here with an example for you. So there are 5 categories in total: management practice, clinical practice, patient-centered practice, communication, and professional accountability. And within each of those categories, there are several indicators or standards. So for example, if you look at clinical practice, an example of a standard or indicator is, I monitor, evaluate, and modify my intervention procedures based on patient outcome. So during the mentorship, you will be reflecting and assessing yourself on whether you meet this standard, and your mentor will also be looking at that standard and assessing you, discussing your practice with you, and interacting with you in that mentorship, through that mentorship process. So let's talk about getting started with your mentorship. So after you become an initial registrant, you're going to review the mentorship program guidelines and discuss the guidelines with your CASLPO approved mentor. And then you're going to submit a mentorship contract to the college within 30 days of beginning your employment. So when I said CASLPO approved mentor, I said that because we do have criteria for mentors. And these criteria are available in the program guidelines, in the website FAQs. And there's also this separate document, which I've pasted here on the slide, that lists the 8 criteria that have to be met by a general registrant in order for them to mentor you. So I will show you where to find all of the mentorship related documents on the website. Basically, when you land on the website, you're going to click on applicants here. And when you click on applicants, it's going to take you to the next page where there will be a box for mentorship in the left-hand side bar menu. And when you click on that, it will take you to a mentorship overview page. And on this overview page, if you scroll down, you'll find a chart that has the mentorship program guidelines, the mentorship contract, and those criteria for mentors. And on that page, there are also many helpful FAQs. So I would highly recommend that when it comes time for you to think about mentorship, I know that the registration and application is going to all come first, but then when you get to the stage where you're thinking about mentorship again, you can come to this page and it has a lot of great information for you. And of course, you'll also have this slide presentation to refer to. So some important points in the mentorship contract for you to discuss with your mentor. Well, first of all, you're going to discuss your start date for your mentorship. And that date must be on or after your date of initial registration with the college. You're also going to discuss with your mentor the process and requirements for mentoring. So reviewing the practice standards and the indicators, how you will achieve those 500 patient care hours and the 48 mentored guidance hours, where, how, and when you will meet with your mentor and how often, the methods of evaluation and feedback. So is your mentor going to provide written, verbal, in-person, video conference? It's been very important, especially over the last year and a half. Using the MSAT, of course, and then where and when you're going to meet. And then we ask you to identify a third party for conflict resolution in your mentorship contract. So as I mentioned earlier, you and your mentor will use the MSAT, the mentorship self-assessment tool, throughout the mentorship period. So this is a tool that we ask you to complete over the 6 months that you're doing your mentorship. And the MSAT allows for the following within the tool. So it allows you to do an assessment of your own practice based on the standards. Your mentor is also able to assess your practice based on the standards in the tool. You can upload evidence files and have an exchange with your mentor using comment boxes. And I'll show you some screenshots later, which will give you an idea of what exactly this looks like. There's also a learning goals section in the MSAT, and your mentor submits a midterm and final evaluation report to the college through the tool. So you and your mentor will gain access to the MSAT when your mentorship contract is approved. So after you submit the contract, we will review it. We'll check that your mentor meets those 8 criteria that are required, and then you'll receive an email communication from the college when your contract is approved. And that email will also have instructions for how you can log into the MSAT. And instructions on how to complete the MSAT are within the MSAT itself and also in the mentorship program guidelines. So I'd like to just show you on the website where you find information about the MSAT. So if you're here on the mentorship overview page, in that left-hand bar menu, you'll see another box there for the mentorship self-assessment tool. And if you click on it, it will take you to another separate web page where you can access the MSAT. And you'll see there are also some FAQs there, including when do I gain access and how do I log into the MSAT. Okay, so a little bit more about the mentorship self-assessment tool. So this is a tool that was launched in 2019 when we took the mentorship online. And I'd like to just bring your attention to the 3 areas of support, promote, and help. So these were 3 goals that we had with the MSAT, that we wanted to bring the mentorship process online to support distance mentoring. And that has become particularly important, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, when mentors and mentees have not been able to be together. But by having this online tool, they've been able to communicate, and also by using video conferencing and so on. The MSAT is also promoting communication and collaboration between you and your mentor, and it's helping to clarify the roles and responsibilities of the mentor and the mentee. We also thought it would be important to tell you about some new practice standards that were introduced in the MSAT in 2020. So when you log into the MSAT, you're going to see that there's a standard now on conflict of interest. There is a standard on the clinical reasoning, And I was mentioning earlier that we do ask you to complete the clinical reasoning tool during your mentorship as a way of ensuring you meet this standard. So we ask you to complete that tool at the midterm evaluation, and you complete it with your mentor. There is a practice standard for advertising now in the communication category. And there is a practice standard for professionalism in the professional accountability category. So this is what the landing page of the MSAT looks like. When you log in, you're going to see on the left-hand side, you can see here the 4 sections of the MSAT that you'll be completing over the 6 months, including the professional standards section, a midterm report section, a learning goals section, and a final report section. Up in the right-hand corner, there is a place you can click to that is labeled Mentee Resources, and if you click there, you'll find lots of helpful guidance documents. And then there's a chart in the center that outlines the different parts, the different sections of the MSAT, and when they are to be completed during the 6 months. When you go into the MSAT, you'll also notice that at the top of each section of the MSAT, there are instructions for how to complete that section. So these instructions are helpful, and you'll even see that below those instructions, it says, need help with this section, click here. And if you click on that document, it'll take you to an even more detailed document with screenshots that shows you how to work through that section of the MSAT. So this is a screenshot of what it looks like in the professional practice standards section. So you can see here that the practice standard is here on the left. This one is indicator 1.2 under management practices. I maintain records which accurately reflect the services provided. And then if you click on an arrow, this black arrow, it gives you examples of how one would meet that standard. And then in this yellow column, that is where you are giving yourself a rating on that practice standard, entering any comments you have, and uploading your evidence. And when your mentor logs in, they have a column of their own. They can see your comments and your evidence if you've uploaded it there. And then they are able to give you a rating on the standard and provide some comments in return. So just to review all of this information, over the course of your mentorship, you will be assessing your own practice and reflecting on how you are meeting practice standards, and you're doing this in the MSAT as well. You are providing comments and evidence to demonstrate that you're meeting practice standards in your MSAT. We ask you to set learning goals and to work towards achieving those learning goals. So we ask you to set 3 learning goals during your mentorship at the midterm time point, and then to achieve those goals by the end. And there's lots of information on the learning goals in the program guidelines, including the SMART goal methodology. We ask you to use SMART goals for your learning goals. You're going to discuss your self-assessment, evidence, and learning goals with your mentor at your midterm and final evaluation meetings. And then we also ask you to prepare 5 charts for your mentor to review at the midterm and final evaluation meetings for a total of 10 charts over the course of your mentorship. To review what your mentor will be doing, your mentor will provide general guidance on professional practice. They will provide guidance on the standards and applying them. At the midterm and final evaluation meetings, mentors will review your MSAT, including your self-assessment, evidence, comments, and learning goals, review 5 patient records to ensure that record-keeping standards are met, assess and confirm that you are meeting the practice standards, and submit those reports to the college. And then importantly, we ask mentors in your final evaluation to recommend you for a general certificate of registration based on the mentorship period. So this is a recommendation that your mentor will make if they feel that you have been able to demonstrate during the mentorship that you are in fact meeting the minimum expected standards of practice. So what happens after the mentorship period is completed? So a general certificate will be issued to you when these 3 things have happened. So when you successfully complete your mentorship, once you have successfully completed the CETP exam, and if applicable, once you've fulfilled any outstanding orders issued by any committee. And then once you have your general registration, to maintain your general registration with CASLPO, you must provide 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech-language pathology during every 3-year period. And that first 3-year period begins on the day that you're issued your general certificate. And also to maintain your general CASLPO registration, you must meet the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program. So as I mentioned earlier, the Quality Assurance Program is a program that you will engage with every year. So every year you will be completing a self-assessment tool called the SAT. You'll be establishing learning goals for your practice. You're required to do 3 every year. You'll be engaging in continuous continuing education, and at CASLPO we call that continuing education CLACs, Continuous Learning Activity Credits. And then you might be selected for a possible peer assessment. So this is very similar to mentorship. So if you go through the mentorship process, you'll be prepared. So we've now come to some questions, and this is actually a question that we received. So the question is, can I work alone in a different clinic than my mentor, as long as by the end of the 6 months of mentorship, my mentor has provided 48 hours of guidance? So the answer to this is yes, it is possible to work in a different clinic or setting than your mentor. However, you must stay in contact with your mentor on a regular basis so that your mentor can confirm that you're meeting the practice standards. And we talked about all of that, the 48 hours of guidance that are required. So the guidance must occur, and it must be at least 48 hours, and it can be indirect or direct. So you might be, this often happens if you're working for an employer that has different sites, and perhaps you're at one site and your mentor is at another site. And that is okay, because as we discussed, your mentor is not supervising your practice, but your mentor is talking to you about your practice, and they have the responsibility of confirming that you meet standards. So you do need to keep in touch with your mentor. So we have some true or false questions, and these are also frequently asked questions. So I'll have 2 jobs, in other words, 2 employers during my mentorship. Therefore, I need to have 2 mentors, 1 for each employment setting. So is this true or false? And we would say that this is false. So you must have 1 designated mentor for your primary employment setting, and that's where you will be working most of the time. Your mentor should be aware of the other employment that you have and the work that you're doing in those other settings. And if you want to count the patient care hours that you do in those other settings, you need to document those patient care hours and provide this documentation to your mentor. And your mentor can also contact colleagues that you work with in those other settings to confirm details about your practice. So multiple mentors are not permitted. You do need to have 1 designated mentor who will take the responsibility of completing the MSAT, providing those guidance hours, and filling out those reports and submitting them to the college. So another true or false question. So true or false? Most employers that hire new SLPs and audiologists know about CASLPO's mentorship program and its requirements. And this is actually false most of the time. There are employers that know about mentorship, but there are also employers that may not know about mentorship. So please ensure that your potential employers understand that it's mandatory for you to complete a 6-month mentorship and what that entails. And the website and the documents are there to help you, and you should share those with your mentor and your employer. So another true or false question: if I can't find a mentor, the college will find one for me. So is this true or false? And this is false. So the college won't find a mentor for you, but the college can assist you by providing a list of registrants to contact. So there are registrants who have agreed to be contacted for mentoring, and we can send you this list, but then you will be responsible to contact them and discuss whether they can mentor you. And if your mentor will be external to your employer, which sometimes happens, then it's important that you discuss the requirements of the mentorship with your employer to ensure that an external mentor, that arrangement is going to work. So another true or false question. My mentor at my primary employment setting, for example, a hospital, doesn't have experience working for the school board, and that will be my other part-time job during my mentorship. So since my mentor doesn't have this experience, she can't mentor me for the work I do in the school board. Is this true or false? And we would say that this is also false. So it's preferable, but mentors are not required to have experience in every area of practice you may work in. Even if your mentor doesn't have experience in the school board, for example, your mentor can still evaluate if you meet the practice standards of the college, because these standards are principles that apply across all practice settings. We do have collaborators in mentorship. So your mentor can collaborate with other SLPs or audiologists to provide your guidance. And information about collaborators is provided in the mentorship program guidelines. So if you'd like to learn more about collaborators, you can go into the guidelines and read about collaborators. So another true or false question. I'm allowed to change mentors in the middle of my mentorship period. For example, if I change jobs, change employment, or my mentor goes on leave. So is this true or false? And we would say this is true. It's possible to change mentors during your mentorship period. However, you do have to submit a new mentorship contract. So you need to go through the contract with your new mentor, have them sign it and submit it to us. A written statement from your first mentor may be required, depending on how far along you are in the mentorship process. And if you realize this is going to happen, contact the college early so that we can assist you with this transition. So that is the end of the mentorship section. And I'll open it up to any other questions that we may have at this point.
Hi, Smita. We do have a question. One is, we have a few. So this is the first one. If I complete registration with CASLPO, would I be able to practice in the USA? They didn't say this, but I want to add to that as an initial registrant.
Okay.
Want to go ahead, Smita?
Colleen, you want to take that one? If you complete your registration with CASLPO, can you practice in the USA? That's the question, right, Jessica?
That's correct.
So I would say the USA has its own requirements depending on the state. You know, the US has its state boards, and they have their own processes for becoming registered to practice. So becoming registered with CASLPO means you are eligible to practice in Ontario. It doesn't mean that you can practice in any other jurisdiction. So you would have to contact that other jurisdiction, that particular state in the US, and find out what their requirements are before you could practice there. Colleen, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add that basically CASLPO's requirements for mentorship, they're all based on standards that are Ontario based. So, you know, doing a mentorship in another jurisdiction just is not applicable in any way, because there are different standards and practices once you are outside of the jurisdiction. So we've been asked this question before of whether or not somebody can, if they find somebody to be a mentor in that jurisdiction that's also CASLPO registered in some way, could they do mentorship in that jurisdiction? And we still say no, because of the nature of the practice standards. They're Ontario specific, so they wouldn't apply in the other jurisdiction, especially in the US.
So I have another question that's similar. Can I have a remote or virtual mentorship?
Okay, I can take this one. Yes, you can. You can have a remote or virtual mentorship. What's important to consider there, though, is the fact that you do have to be directly observed by your mentor. That direct observation piece is required. And also the record review. As I mentioned, your mentor needs to be able to review your patient records at the midterm and at the final to confirm that you're meeting standards. So if everything is going to be virtual, it'll be important to discuss with your mentor and your employer. How is the direct observation going to happen of your practice, and how is the record review going to happen? So there have been some cases where people will, if they're using a virtual platform, now a lot of SLPs are obviously doing virtual care, virtual practice. So sometimes with the patient's consent, a mentor can join and watch a session virtually as it's occurring. That could be direct observation. In terms of the record review, the other thing, you can also record patient appointments with patient consent, of course. You can record a session and then your mentor could review it afterwards, watching the recording and then talking to you about that appointment. So that could be a way that it could be done virtually. And then for the record review, you need to consider the privacy and confidentiality aspect. So if you're going to be allowing your mentor to review records virtually, you want to ensure you're using a platform or a way of doing this that's going to ensure privacy and confidentiality of the patient information, especially if there's going to be sensitive information. You could redact sensitive information as well before you share evidence or records with your mentor. That's one way of protecting privacy and confidentiality. But yes, virtual mentorship is possible. You just have to make some of these considerations and make sure that you discuss them with your employer and your mentor.
All right, I have one more mentorship question, and it's, what if I'm not getting as many hours as I thought I might, and I don't have enough hours at the midterm report?
Yeah, that has happened often. And so if you reach that midterm time point and you realize you don't have enough hours, then that would be a reason to request an extension. And you could fill out the extension request that's available in your MSAT and send it in and just explain that you require an extension and this is the reason why. And then we would extend the whole mentorship. So we would make your midterm report due a little later, and we would make the final report due later so that you have time to complete the hours that are required.
Wonderful. So that's it for mentorship questions, but I do have a couple other questions regarding registration, and I'm going to direct them towards Colleen, if that's okay. Thank you so much, Samita.
No
Colleen, so I have a question for you, and it's, has there been consideration of allowing 2 attempts and 12 months probation due to the December sitting being the first sitting in Ontario in regards to the CETP exam?
Sure. So I guess we would say that although this is the first time that Ontario applicants have taken the CETP exams, the December exam will be the third running of the CETP exams for SAC. And SAC has decades of experience running professional exams and have demonstrated a very high validity to their exams. And as a college, we have full confidence in their ability to develop and administer the CETP exam. With respect to our consideration of more than one attempt, CASLPO's council, which is made up of professional members of audiology and speech language pathology, as well as academic members and public members, did debate that issue. And it was determined that ultimately CASLPO's mandate is to protect the public. So if an initial registrant does not pass a competency exam, CASLPO cannot continue their registration until they've demonstrated that they do have the competence or the minimum competence for registration. So that's why we went with the one attempt policy.
Okay, I have another question. This is a three-parter, but it might take me a second to ask it. So if you have any questions, let me know. I was wondering if you could specify what we can and cannot do while our registration is pending. I understand all that was stated about how we cannot refer to ourselves as an SLP, but if they are asking, I think they mean an employer, maybe. If the employer is asking if we can act as an SLP assistant role, which while it is pending, example, conducting treatment, Colleen, you understand where I'm going with this, I think.
Yes.
Basically, like, what can they tell their employer, and like, how can they like hold themselves out while they're waiting for the registration process to be complete?
Okay, so just to say that while you are waiting for registration, you can, if your employer would like to hire you as support personnel, you can do that. So CASLPO does publish a guideline for the use of supportive personnel, both for speech language pathology and for audiology. So you can have a look at that and see the person who you're working with would be a speech pathologist or an audiologist, and they have a duty to supervise support personnel. And that's a role that you can definitely take. Support personnel is not a regulated profession in Ontario, so you can definitely act in that role until registration is issued. I guess having said that, you do have to be careful once you do start working to, make sure that you don't do any of those things I mentioned earlier, such as holding yourself out in any way with respect to your speech language pathology degree or using the professional titles. So definitely can act in the supporting role, and support personnel do require supervision of either an SLP or an audiologist.
That was great. That answers all of the questions that have been asked. So every single question, if you had one, it's been answered, or I've told you to email registration@caslpo.com if you have any others.
Okay.
So thank you.
Smita, could you advance to the last slide?
Yes.
Thank you so much to everybody who participated in today's webinar. We want to bring your attention to some of our social media platforms, such as our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Please follow us if you can. And also, if you'd like to get more information, we have those email contacts for both international grads at CASLPO.com and for mentorship at CASLPO.com. So, if you have any questions that occur to you after you leave the presentation, please do send them to us, and we'd be happy to answer those questions. So thank you again, and yeah, that's it for today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.